talk a bit about the trends that are shaping global wine demand, especially younger consumers. I guess in part it comes down to this kind of junction, if you will, between quality and what one can feel comfortable paying.
Yes, that's right. I think overall we're seeing a trend that younger generations are consuming less alcohol in general. And there is a shift towards consumption of alcohol of higher quality, whether it's wine or other beverages. There's also, a trend to drinking less alcohol in general. So whether it's beverage, so some beverages with lower alcohol content are, we're seeing some increased market share for those beverages.
Now, I read about you, and you have a fascinating background focusing on the use of forecasting, using that as a tool, and the advent of technology to reduce the risks to vineyards. And now, in this world of climate change, as I understand it, dampness or dryness of soil makes a huge difference. And I can only imagine how important what is going on really is to the vineyards all over the world.
Yes, so climate change does pose some real long-term risks, primarily through heat waves, which we've seen in 2024, not just in the US, but also in Europe, and smoke taint from wildfires, which again, we have seen not only in the US, but also in Europe. And the 2024, well, I can speak for California, that's
Mm.
kind of my area of expertise. And, California is the major producing wine grape producing region here in the US. The value of production was down over 20%. And that's mostly from the reduction in yield. Prices fell by about 3%. However, not all of that is attributable to climate change. So climate change definitely affects the production of grapes. But typically, if we see a reduction in quantity, we would see the increase in prices, and we don't see that, and that's an indicator that the demand is lower, right? So the demand is falling.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked a bit about California. I understand that's your strong suit, but also let's talk about other areas. Spain, for example, Australia, because those areas have also been affected somewhat dramatically by heat, and I presume that can only affect the cost and quality of wines as well.
Yes, so heat does affect production. So in regions where heat waves are an issue, that's where we see the largest decline in production typically. However, again, I mean, I would like to emphasize that while climate change does affect the production
Uh-huh.
of wine grapes, the reduction in the value of wine grapes that we're seeing is largely due to this decline in demand, which is the bigger problem for the global wine industry.
Wow. Okay, so let's add all this up together because we have weather, we have less demand, and we also have global tariffs and some global uncertainty from an economic standpoint.
Mhm.
And wine makers, I'm sure they walk a very fine line between profit and loss. It must be very difficult for them.
Yes, and especially so there's a lot of heterogeneity or variation in the quality and price of wine, as we know, and that comes from the quality and price of wine grapes, which vary a lot by region, among regions in California and world regions. And the producers of wine that is priced lower typically operate with lower margins.
Mm.
And so any increase in cost, so we are also seeing increases in cost of production. So the materials are more expensive. Labor is an issue. There's some uncertainties with supply chains, which we've seen in the last few years. So the lower priced wines definitely would suffer more from that. We do see some shift towards higher priced wines, so consumer interest in higher priced wines. But again, those are by volume. That's not the biggest share of the market. The majority of the market is the bulk wine and lower priced wines.
Interesting. I'm curious how China plays into all of this because obviously there's a massive middle class in that nation, and they tend to uh, indulge in luxuries now and then. So, are expensive wines finding a home in China?
Well, so China does, our expensive wines do find a home in China, and I think, because the wine consumption there is part of, as I understand, is part of, gift giving and hosting, and so people are interested in nicer wines. So there is some interest in learning about wine and especially nice wine. Consumption of wine in China has been decreasing in the last few years, and there is some talk about perhaps resurgence of interest in finer wines. So that is an avenue possibly of growth because China is a huge market. But again, so far we have seen decrease in wine consumption from China since about 2019.